Hello, I'm Miranda Carberry-Brown, and I am here from PwC, the Consulting Risk Practice. And I'm delighted today to be joined for this Risk Mind session by Mike Silva, Chief Compliance Officer of UBS Americas. Hello, Mike. How are you?
I'm just fine, Miranda. Thank you very much for having me. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Delighted to be joined by you today. It's a shame we're not in Barcelona, but alas, we are here virtually. So I will dive straight in what can only be an unprecedented year for all of us in trying to understand your experiences as a Chief Compliance Officer in these strange times. So following what has been an extremely tough year, I guess for you, Mike, what do you foresee as being the biggest challenges ahead for 2021?
Well, when I look at 2021, I tend to bucket the challenges I see there in two buckets, one substantive and the other managerial. On the substantive side, there's a number of issues that compliance officers need to be paying particular attention to. For an organization like UBS in particular, suitability is a very important concern. We have a situation where there's an increasing imbalance between real economic conditions and market valuations. And we need to make sure that we're putting our customers in suitable investments for a situation where there could potentially be a significant market downturn. Now, our customers all obviously have different appetites for risk, and some may be fine with that environment. Others we need to be more careful with. So suitability is something we're paying an immense amount of attention to at UBS. Hopefully this won't be the case, but given economic conditions, there's a possibility of a number of credit situations, a volume of credit situations, and obviously for compliance officers, that's where you want to think very carefully about treating customers fairly. Make sure that loan forbearance documentation is complete. In particular, if you get into a mortgage foreclosure situation, hopefully that won't be anywhere near what it was in 2008, 2009, but you never know. You got to be careful under the CARES Act. There's protections for single-family mortgages that are secured by the U.S. government. You have to be mindful of those. Many states have implemented some form of foreclosure moratorium, so very mindful of the state rules. Mm-hmm. And then just be very mindful that any foreclosures during this period, I predict, will be closely scrutinized. Just as they were closely scrutinized post 2008, 2009. Absolutely. So we want to make sure that customers are absolutely treated fairly. Everything is absolutely properly documented. And those are some of the biggest substantive concerns I have. On the managerial side, there's really two things. One, here at UBS and most financial institutions, we've been in remote operations, almost entirely remote operations since March. Mm-hmm. And we've adjusted well to those, but we're going to be, it seems, in remote operations well into 2021, most likely until at least the spring, if not longer. And we have to keep our vigilance up. Remote operations have some personal advantages in terms of flexibility and so forth, but they require a lot of extra effort around things like surveillance and supervision, and there's any number of safeguards we've had to put in place to make sure that we're meeting regulatory requirements around recording conversations and so forth, and we have to keep our vigilance up there. There's also the issue of morale that I worry about as we continue in remote operations. I think that like all Americans, compliance officers working at homes are experiencing the ongoing crisis is more and more of an emotional burden. So you got to work hard to keep that in mind. And then finally, maintaining a sense of teamwork and culture in this environment is really a challenge. I have a number of employees at this point who've not only never been in a UBS building, never even met a UBS person in person. We now hire and onboard entirely remotely, and we happen to be growing UBS compliance. So I think it could be that as much as 5% of my staff has never even met a UBS person. So how do you maintain a sense of teamwork and a culture like that? And then finally, in the managerial bucket, post-COVID, there's no doubt going to be, we're going to have to be very mindful and attuned to communications from regulators and regulatory trends. The post-COVID world, one way or the other, is going to be, I think, supervised in a different way. Certainly, we're going to have more work from home situations. What's the right balance there? That's going to be a tricky thing to decide. It's now I look forward to the post-COVID managerial issues, to be honest with you. But those are my thoughts about 2021.
Yeah, you've touched on a number of key, not only compliance concepts, but just a number of, I guess you could almost call 2020 a road test for a number of these things, and testing infrastructure and actually, aside from the managerial aspect, the piece, I liked your piece around suitability. That's something that, when I think about compliance and investor protection and those items there in what is quite a volatile situation, that's really crucial. So some really interesting answers there.
And something we're very focused on at UBS.
Absolutely, absolutely. So with a lot more focus now on integrated working in the financial services industry, how, in your view, Mike, can you see CCOs better working and interacting with CROs and MRLOs?
Now, this question gives me a chance to get up on one of my favorite soapboxes, which is about reporting relationships for CCOs. Okay. I think at UBS we have the ideal situation in terms of reporting relationships that really ensure good interaction between the CRO, CCO, and the MLRO. Here we call it head of financial crime. In the U.S. regionally, I report to the U.S. Chief Risk Officer, and the head of financial crimes reports to me as the Chief Compliance Officer. So right away, I'm right in there. I am part of the CRO's world, right? I'm the non-financial risk part. So I'm in every CRO forum, and we, as my regional boss, we interact all the time, and likewise, the head of financial crime is closely integrated, and I think that's an ideal situation. Now, globally, I report to the Global Chief Compliance Officer of UBS, who reports to the CEO. Yes. And I think that is gives us an important stature and important visibility. Now, the other possibility is for the Chief Compliance Officer to report to the Chief Legal Officer. Yes. Now, that situation I find much less than optimum, because then you are not only taken out of the CRO's world, you have no link to anyone who is a peer of the chief legal officer, and it just creates a different dynamic. Now, if you are in that situation, it just takes extra effort to get, and I think that's really incumbent on the Chief Compliance Officer to make sure that there's a very regular operating rhythm between him and her and the Chief Risk Officer. Being on the risk committees, the reputational risk committee, the financial crimes committee, the risk steering committee, and whatever the risk forums are, there just has to be regular communication. But it gets a little complicated because in that scenario, the CRO and the Chief Legal Officer are peers, right? Yeah. And you are now reporting to the Chief Legal Officer. So personally, I don't think that's an optimum place for compliance to be. That's a personal opinion. But I think that's the best. Reporting relationships, I think, are the best way to make sure that those three important figures, the CRO, CCO, and the MLRO, are working well together.
Absolutely, and from my personal experience, I think it's very difficult to see those roles, to kind of unbundle those roles. They do work in tandem, and there's a lot of learning to be taken from each, especially when it comes to non-financial risk management. So definitely, I concur with you on that. Moving now to ethical considerations. So with increased pressure on how organizations are addressing ethical considerations, such as climate change and sustainable investment, what's keeping compliance officers awake at night?
Well, first of all, I mean, what a wonderful thing this is, right? This increased focus on ESG investing, environmental, social, and corporate governance. I mean, I think we all applaud it, but certainly we have embraced it at UBS. So, bravo. I mean, it's just a fantastic thing. Now, that said, it does create challenges for a compliance officer. ESG is a term of art that's fairly imprecise, and it's which makes it difficult for compliance officers and all risk professionals to have a standard process for dealing with them. And obviously something that's very key is the representations we make about the ESG investments we offer or facilitate, right? Now, to me, this is just another form of reputational risk, right? That's not an easy thing to imagine. There's no set formulas to it. But same thing for SOX. A lot of SOX is scripted, but not all of it, right?
Yeah.
I would say that deciding on a level of due diligence that you're going to be comfortable with to make sure that the representations you're making about ESG investing is going to be a challenge, but a very manageable one in the long run. It's just another flavor of something we're used to, and frankly, it's a as I say when I started, I'm just very excited about the concept. So I look forward to figuring out what's the best way to due diligence these sort of things.
Absolutely. And I guess finally, we already started to touch on customer protection during the first question where you referred to suitability. And I guess in the industry, we're seeing a bigger push towards increasing customer protection. So I guess from your perspective, how can we better support the customer journey, the start and life cycle, and what more should we be doing to be the customer's champion?
Right. So this is a chance for me to climb up on another one of my favorite soapboxes,
Right.
which is culture.
Yes.
If you look at all the different ways that customers have been treated poorly at different financial institutions, false accounts, inappropriate foreclosures, there's so many ways for a customer to be treated inappropriately that obviously you have to have rules, processes, and procedures designed to protect customers. But I think first and foremost, you've got to have a culture that prioritizes customers, that the purpose, the reason you get up every day is to serve customers well. Here at UBS, we have a new CEO who's actually started a purpose initiative, deciding what is our purpose, and it's still being worked out. But I'll obviously, all of the initial thinking is around serving serving the client, serving the customer. And in my experience, culture crushes strategy, processes, procedures. The only true way, in my mind, or the best way, I should say, is absolutely you have to have the normal set of strong internal controls and protections. But what you most of all have to have, from the CEO on down, is a culture where the customer comes first. The reason you come to work every day is to help customers solve their problems, to protect customers, to make their lives better. And if you've got that mindset, if that's what your institution is about, if you see that as a calling, that is the best way, in my experience, to make sure the customer has a good experience end to end.
Absolutely agree with that. I think culture and the customer being at the heart of your culture underpins everything. So I can really concur with that. Thank you so much, Mike, for taking us through your experiences as a Chief Compliance Officer at a leading organization. It's been really interesting to hear your knowledge and insights, and hopefully we can meet again, albeit in sunnier climes next year, where we won't be virtual, hopefully.
Yes, I hope, yes. Looking forward to that. And thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
No problem at all. Thank you very much.